thanks to her heritage and the work that John B. Dennis did, we have a wonderful city that we can be proud of, and I'm glad she's here to join in with this ceremony. If you'll help me and welcome Dr. Harriet Dennis Klein. Also, I want to thank Miss Ann Morrison and Nancy Garrett with the Survivors Club. They were extremely instrumental in making sure this renovation took place. Mike Billingsley also was very important and instrumental in making this happen. Our Mayor Dennis Phillips, was really the catalyst to bring everyone together, and then I also want to thank our staff here at Oak Hill. They've worked long and hard to get this looking as best as it can. And having said that, also want to thank Matt Anderson with Big East Catering. After the ceremony, we'll have some music from the 1917 era, and there's water and coffee and bagels for everyone to enjoy. And at this time, if I think Mike Billingsley is going to come and share a little bit of history, and then John Campbell may speak a few words about the history of it. Was the first city in the state to have a city manager-ran government, and I was telling Dr. Klein on the way over here, I don't know what significance it is, but our mayor's name is Dennis and our city manager's name is John, and at least it gave us a laugh. But also Nancy Garrett will be coming to give some interesting history about Lola Dennis, the wife of John B. Dennis. So God bless you all, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. About a year and a half ago, I was asked to see if I could locate some of the heirs to the Dennis family, and didn't have a whole lot to go on. There's a fair amount written about Mr. Dennis, and of course, if it weren't for him, none of us would be here today in this location. So I got to reading about him. I knew he was from Gardner, Maine. And I knew that he was a banker, and I had heard the same stories you've heard about how he came to Kingsport and how he and Fred Johnson basically decided to build a city and build an industrial city. And in fact, that's exactly what they've done. Tennessee's lucky to have Kingsport because it's probably the most industrial city in the state. Dr. Klein, Harriet Klein, who's here today, I'm so pleased that she's here, and I've corresponded for some time now. And I've sent her pictures of the site, and we've discussed various things. She really could be the one to tell you all about the family history. It's a wonderful history. This family goes all the way back to Ipswich, Massachusetts, 1688. And you told me there's actually a chair that one of your ancestors built that's in a museum there, or. It's okay. That's right. Museum of Art, built by her ancestors. Mr. Dennis came from Maine. He went to New York and Boston, worked in the finance world, became a partner in Blair and Company, which was founded by a gentleman named James Blair. And their interest was in railroads and in primarily. And Mr. Dennis, who was unrelated to the Blair family, actually had no initial investment in that company, because of his astute business acumen, became the leader of that company, and was very interested in the coal fields of Southwest Virginia, and encouraged the Blair company to buy up a large portion of the Southwest Virginia Coal Company. Got with George Carter, and for those of you who don't know who George Carter is, he was the founder of the Carolina-Clinchfield, Ohio Railroad. And Mr. Carter lived over in Johnson City, gave the land for ETSU, where ETSU is now. Mr. Dennis was the financier of that railroad, eventually became the president of it, and then the chairman of the board, and his brother, Henry, Ray Dennis became the president of that railroad. John B. Dennis also was one of the founders of the Kingsport Press and became the chairman of the board of the Kingsport Press. For those of you who didn't know, he was also director of Penn-Dixie Cement Company and did a lot of other things. He was a very private person, never sought any limelight, never sought any publicity. So there's not a lot written about him in newspaper accounts and things like that. He had no children, but he did have one brother, and that was Henry Ray Dennis. And I actually have a photograph of them together with some other gentlemen, which hangs in my office as the founders of Kingsport. And Henry Ray had two children, James Dennis and Thomas Gordon Dennis. And really, Thomas Gordon Dennis is the gentleman I found to sort of track the family down. He passed away in 1999 down in Florida, but I was able to find him, and through him I was able to find Dr. Klein and the other siblings' names, and basically took it from there and got on the internet and tried to figure out if I could find them. And fortunately, I was able to find her. I think one of her sisters lives out of the country. Her brother two of them live out of the country. I think she has a brother who lives in Colorado. And anyway, I was just so pleased that she could come and so honored to be here. But everything that I learned about the Dennis family, both from him and his brother, was nothing but quality, honest, hardworking, good American people who cared about their fellow man. And I guess Mr. Dennis lived at Rotherwood Mansion. He and his wife Lola lived there, and the government came and took that over during World War II, and that's why you have Holston Ordnance there now. And so they confiscated it, if you want to say it that way, for the war effort. Mr. Dennis moved over to Asheville during that time and passed away in Asheville in 1947. So that's basically a brief history. I could go into a lot more, but I know you're not interested in that. I'm just so pleased that we're able to honor one of our founders of our city this way, and think it's a befitting thing to do for a community that was founded by a gentleman like with Mr. Dennis's qualities and character. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today, and certainly want to thank Jantry and the Oak Hill Cemetery ownership and staff for all the work they've done here. And Mike, certainly appreciate all the work that you've done in terms of finding the heritage and trying to find the people, because that's always a real challenge. I've had to deal with some cemetery situations before, and it is a real challenge to find that takes place. This means a lot to me, being from Kingsport, and as a young high school student who started to realize that we really had a special community here. And one of the reasons we had this special community was because we had such a commitment to a professional approach and a different approach to a city, being a planned city and one that had professional government. One of the important concepts that we have today in city government, and you hear a lot of cities talk about it, is sustainability. And that's not sustainability to be the status quo. That actually means that you try to take the economic, the environmental, and the social approach to how you're continually improving as a community. And how fortunate we were that people like Mr. Dennis were members of the progressive movement of that era, of the turn of the century, and really felt like there was a better way to do things in terms of interrelating industry, transportation, and the way a community exists. So for that reason, they went out and found the most modern form of government at that time for local government. If you realize that council manager government at that time, sometimes called city manager government, had only started in 1908 in Stanton, Virginia. And it came from a long movement of trying to correct corruption in government of the late 1800s. A lot of people working on that, including President Woodrow Wilson at Princeton, preached about the public administration dichotomy and all. So council manager government emerged and was considered the bright government, the better way to run things for the future. But Dennis didn't stop there, and in conjunction with J. Fred Johnson, he also felt like the community needed to be planned, so there would be a good interrelationship of industry, where people lived, where they played, and those kind of things. So he went and got John Nolan, the foremost planner of his day. And then he said, we need a great school system. And some people to this day still think the reason we're called the model city is because he went to Columbia University, which was the best in education at that time, and said, design us a school system. So we had a great school system city level before many of the cities of the state of Tennessee really broke off and became city school systems. So all those factors gave us a chance to be sustainable for the long term because of the vision of Mr. Dennis and others that worked with him. So I think this is great that we're honoring him and we're actually establishing what this particular shrine does, and it's such a great view of Kingsport and certainly sets up the vision that he set up here for the future. Thank you very much for that.
Now, Jantry did not prepare me for speaking. He announced it a few minutes ago. But I would like to talk about Nola Dennis for a few minutes. She is also very much a part of the scene here in Kingsport in the early years. She and Mr. Dennis married after she had had a distinguished career of her own. She was born in Lawrence, South Carolina, graduated from Randolph-Macon and the Cornell School, graduate school in landscape architecture. She was employed at several large firms in Baltimore, Charlotte, and Atlanta. She was hired by the Kingsport Improvement Company and moved to Kingsport. And she was just a fireball, as my cousin Ann, who is the supplier of all this information, said. She planted all our streets with trees. She established a nursery in Fair Acres that I remember as a child remnants of. She planted every downtown street, White City, the 50s, landscaped them all. And the schools. So she was quite very active as a beautifier of our city, our new city. It was planned, but it was also planned for its shrubberies and trees, so the vegetation was quite lovely. Ann noted that in her talk about Mrs. Dennis that Mrs. Genevieve Chevelle had heard one time that there were plans to cut down some of the trees Mrs. Dennis had planted, and she got a group together and said they were going to chain themselves to those trees. So the plans were canceled, but chaining yourself to trees was maybe a Kingsport innovation at a very early time. Anyway, Mrs. Dennis and Mr. Dennis married at a late age. She was in her 40s and he was in his 60s. And they did move to Asheville, North Carolina. But while they were at Rotherwood, Mrs. Dennis was active in landscaping. And we have today here a lady that grew up in Rotherwood, Mrs. Jill Ellis, who was a counselor at DB, and her daughter, Donella. But Jill knew the Dennises very well, both Mr. and Mrs. Dennis. And her mom was the cook for the Dennis, and I understand an excellent cook. And so anyway, if you have an opportunity to speak to Jill, please do so. When Mrs. Dennis was older, near the time of her death, the Rotary Club decided that they would like to have a fountain pool in between the library and the Kingsport Power Company. And so a group approached Mrs. Dennis, and she donated $10,000 to have that fountain erected. And not too many years ago, there was a memorial plaque put on it in honor of her. But she originally planted that area between the two buildings, and she had some complaints, though. The cows were still there and munching her on her plantings. So they agreed to that if you had a cow there, you had to stake it. So but anyway, she made many, many contributions to our town, and some remain, some are gone, but we are all indebted to her for her efforts to beautify our lovely town. Thank you.
Whether they're proud of it or not, I'm not sure, but Miss Ellis and Miss Garrett were teachers of mine at Dobbins Bennett. I enjoyed all 7 years there, by the way. At this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Harriet Dennis Klein to come and join me, and the mayor, if you would, come and join me as well. She's going to speak a few words in formally dedicating this resting place, the renovation of this resting place, and if you'll please welcome Dr. Klein. Thank you.
I'm doing the dedication?
Well, no,
I'm just talking,
just
right?
talking, yeah.
Good, good. I didn't know I was talking either. And I apologize. I was not sick when he called me last week. I was not sick when I made the plane reservations, but I certainly came down. First of all, I'm not a doctor. I'm a psychologist. And as my mother would say, be careful what you tell me. Sorry. When Mike found me last year, where is Mike? When he found me, there he is. You could have bowled me over with a feather. I was like, first of all, he says he's the city attorney, and I'm going, uh-oh, what'd we do now? You know, that's where my thinking was. And then he told me the story, and he sent me the photographs, and I totally concurred with him. I got out the message to my siblings that there are 5 in my generation. We're Henry Ray Dennis's kids, and there are 5 of us. So I got the word out to them, and I said, is it okay? And, of course, their answer was typically Dennis, as long as we don't have to pay for it. Yes, okay, no comment needed there. So, and then we kind of said, well, you know, we'd like to come down, but we didn't hear anything for a while, and, of course, the economy tanked, and, you know, a lot went on in all our lives. My mother passed away at 95, and a whole bunch of stuff went on. So then finally, just last week, out of the blue, I get this phone call saying, oh, we've got it done. And I went, oh. So when I asked when there was going to be are you going to do a ceremony or dedication? And they said, yes. I said, oh, good. When? He says, Monday. I went, oh, okay, I'll be there. And I tried very hard to get my the oldest grandchild is 13, to come with me. And had I known that the Marriott had that incredible golf course, I might have gotten him down here. But he was he's a 13-year-old. I don't have to say more about that. The 13-year-olds are shy. In the next generation, there are 4 Dennis boys. Ray Jr., who is the one with the pink Cadillac that Tom talks about. Yes, pink Cadillac. Jimmy Orman Dennis, who was married a woman who was actually, I think, from Asheville, or had background in Asheville. And my father, Thomas Dennis, and the younger brother was David Dennis. My father was the only one who had children. So of my generation, as I say, there are 5 of us. And the next generation, I'm really the only one that produced a lot. I mean, I produced 3. My sister in Australia produced 2. And we have 1 adopted. So it's a very, very small community. So when people say I'm related to you as a Dennis, I have to look at them and say, probably not. Although, going back, I think David and Julia Dennis, John Bartlett's parents, I think that David was one of many, like maybe 10, maybe something, a large group. So there are other people out there, but they're not, this immediate family is really, really tiny. So I cannot tell you how important this is, because the family's going to die out. There are no more Dennis males. We're done. I was the only one that produced. My 2 brothers did not produce any children that they talk about. No, I don't think they did. So So this is important, and what, can I say something about the museum? Okay, so when, I'm not sure it was Mike or Dantry mentioned a possibility of establishing a museum here, I got very excited because, you know, we don't live the lifestyle of Rotherwood, but I have been able to inherit some of the antiques, the lovingly cared for items that belong to the family, and they have no place to go. My kids are terrific kids. They're doing very well in life, and they look at me like, So what I'm hoping is that we can help establish that museum using some of the materials that we're fairly sure came from that Dennis line. And luckily, the sister in Australia, luckily because she's in Australia, but luckily because she has a good memory, has been able to tell me, okay, that was John's, that was Harriet's, that was, you know, she knows where these things came from. So as the time goes by, as we get that established, and maybe in time for your centennial, we can get some of those items down here so that you will have something tangible to say, touch this, this was John B.'s. So I'm very excited. I think this is, I'm honored. What a beautiful job. When he showed me the pictures of the before pictures, it was very sad. And it was very beautifully, tastefully done. I think John is not rolling over in his grave. I think he's very happy. So thank you very much.
At this time, if I can have our board members come up here, and John Campbell, if you'll come up, and Mike Billingsley, if you'll come up, we've got a presentation. And also want to welcome the representative Tony Shipley is here, and members of the fire department and city staff. If you want to join us, please feel free to. The two wreaths that we have back here were made specifically to remember John B. Dennis and Lola Dennis. And at this time, before the mayor speaks and gives a presentation, if you'll join me just in a moment of silence to remember them and pray for their family that exists and the city that they helped create. All right, Mayor Phillips.
Actually, Janty told me I had to hurry because those two wreaths were for 11:30 funeral, and that's probably the truth. If he borrowed them, if you didn't have the opportunity to see this a year ago, I'm not sure you could really appreciate the hard work and everything that's went into it. And when Ann Morrison and Nancy Garrett at the Survivors Club mentioned this to us, the first person I called was Mike Billingsley. And you've got to remember, when I was first elected mayor 7 years ago, I asked Mike Billingsley to look at a parking place downtown. He's still looking at it. A year ago, we asked him to do this, and I never saw anybody pay something as much attention as he. I think he fell in love with the whole family that he could find, but Mike did do a tremendous amount of work and made this possible. And I'm not sure, those of you that don't know, the problem was where we're standing is not a part of Oak Hill. And you can't really do something or anything to a gravesite without someone's permission. And in this case, it was a little more difficult to get to the next of kin and get permission, but I cannot say enough about the staff of the city and Oak Hill that made this possible. You know, if you don't honor and respect your past, you're not going to have much of a future. And I think that's something that the Survivors Club truly believes in, and I hope the Survivors Club is looking for members, and I think they're talking about changing their name from the Survivors Club. It's a group of people that are interested in the history of Kingsport, and it's not just survivors. I think at one time maybe a requirement was you needed to be over 70 years old. I think now you just need to be able to contribute to the history of Kingsport, and they meet once a month at First Presbyterian Church, and if you've never had the opportunity to attend one of their meetings, please do so, because I can tell you in the political world, I cannot begin to tell you how powerful this group of people are, because if they want something, you have to listen, and they are really the result of you seeing what you are today. And I cannot believe that you flew all the way down here. We are so pleased that you did that, and thank you. And please come back more often. But we think it only fitting that we award you a key to the city of Kingsport, Tennessee, to Dr. Harriet Dennis Klein, and hope that while you're in New York or wherever you may be, that you will think of Kingsport as your second home, and think of us as your friends and family. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Let me turn it around here. These photographers go wild if you don't know how to picture.
Put it this way. Okay.
But thank you so much.
Is that in there? Can I?
You can take that out.
Very, very nice. Thank you very much. It was truly, truly an honor. Honor for me, truly. And I spoke last night to someone who came here for the Bristol races, and they were talking about retiring in Kingsport. So, you know, all things are possible. You know, there's movement. There's movement. We'll see. But I will definitely be back, and I will bring the kids back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
God bless each of you, and thank you for coming.